This series is the most overrated series we got. I don't know where you guys stand. Well, I don't know if you're on the Pistons bandwagon, but I will say, New York's a team that I think gets discredited a lot for a handful of bad games. I don't know where you're at, but I think Detroit might be a little bit of fool's gold here.
So I do think the Pistons are an actual good team. I'm a huge Cade fan. I've been a believer in Cade since I've seen, there's a couple games early in his Celtics career, and I think he's got a little Luka to his game, if I'm being honest. He kind of plays at his own pace, and he dictates the game in this way that I really think there's only a handful of guys that when you watch a game, you can see them manipulate that across the board. And I feel like since I was a rookie, I've seen parts of him be able to do that. And so I'm a huge Cade believer. Having said that, I think you're spot on, Robbie. Like I think this series here, and I was talking about this last night with a buddy of mine who's a Knicks fan. This is Knicks in 5. I just think at the end of the day, there's too much of a talent gap outside of Cade Cunningham, because you can convince me. I think Jalen Brunson's the best player in the series, but the top 3 are very obvious. You can slot them however you want. And then from there, the next 4 or 5 guys are probably all Knicks until you get to maybe Jalen Duren, who's probably the Pistons' second best player. On top of that, they just have, we've seen it time and time again. You need on-ball creation in the playoffs. Next guy up after Cade, this is supposed to be the Jaden Ivey spot, right? And this is what they've surprisingly been able to overcome all season to get to this 6 seed. But now you're looking at, I guess, Dennis Schroeder is kind of your number 2 for on-ball creation. Like, we as Celtics fans, even though, I don't mind a little bit of Dennis Schroeder, there's going to be a lot more of Dennis Schroeder needed than anybody needs to be successful. And it's just not a winning recipe. And so, the Pistons are a team on the rise. I do love what they're building and what they have. I live out here in Austin, Texas, and they played the Spurs actually in Austin. So myself and my co-host Greg went to the game. Their athleticism and physicality is real. Like between Asar Thompson and, Jalen Duren, what they bring in with B. Stu, Ron Holland, they just added some adults to the mix with Tim Hardaway and Tobias Harris and Malik Beasley this year. And that's really been one of the biggest differences, just mixing this youth with some adults in the room. But ultimately, when you look at this Knicks team, this is the Knicks, even though they're a bad matchup for the Celtics, they're one of the few teams in the NBA that from a talent level at that top 6-7 area are at least in the vicinity. They're in the ballpark. Right. They're in the area that you can have a rational conversation of these top 6 versus that top 6. The matchup just doesn't dictate that against the Celtics, but against this Pistons team, I think it's going to be overwhelming. I think it's going to be a series where Pistons are going to try and goon it up a bit. Like, Beef Stew, Ron Holland, they're going to get in the mix. They're going to get scrappy. I think there's going to be a couple of times where it feels like it's closer than it really is. But the talent gap is just really, I think, going to eventually show itself in this. And the Pistons are a guy or two, specifically that Jaden Ivey, that second creator, that second guy that can go get his own bucket and help create for others. They just don't have enough of that. It's too much on Cade's shoulders. And so with that, the Knicks, I think, are easy going to take this one. Like I said, there's going to be a few moments that make it feel tighter than it is. But at the end of the day, the Knicks have too much. Jalen Brunson, Cat, I think they're going to be able to spam. They're going to be able to spam the Pistons with their pick and roll, pick and pop. It's one of the best in the NBA. And then you're able to then have, Mikal and OG in their respective roles in which they've been able to grow a little bit with Jalen Brunson being hurt. The Knicks held up pretty well in those non-Jalen Brunson games. And I think ultimately they're going to actually get some benefits of that in this series. And yeah, I just don't see a world in which the Pistons are pulling this off unless the Knicks really find a way to beat themselves, or Jalen Brunson's injury reoccurs, or there's something along those lines that we can't predict at this time. To me, this is overwhelming talent versus a team that's spirited on the come up. But I got Knicks in 5 for this one.
Yeah, this is a series between a legitimately built team versus a thrown together team. That's how I see it. The Pistons, despite them having a lot of talent on their roster, I think they actually have, if you not in terms of talent as a whole, but just in terms of deep, like the depth of the two rosters, I do see the Pistons having a couple more players on the back end of the rotation that could do something aside from the Knicks, who we've known their rotation's been a little thin all season. But Will, you mentioned it at the top, the talent discrepancy is quite stark. When you have a player like Karl Anthony Towns, who he's really statistically one of the best big men in NBA history. Now, there's a bunch of debates out there, whatever. We know how good he is as a big guy, potentially, or particularly on the offensive end of the floor. When you have him on the roster along with Jalen Brunson, I think Jalen Brunson and Cade Cunningham, there could be some canceling out in this series from them. Now, I do see Cade Cunningham as a better playmaker than Jalen Brunson. I see Jalen Brunson as a more crafty scorer, even though Cade Cunningham is certainly coming up in that category every single year of his career. I could see that kind of canceling itself out a little bit this series, even though I would not be surprised if Cade Cunningham does establish himself as not the best player in this series, but very close to it. But that's where I think Karl Anthony Towns could just have so much impact. You do look at some of what Detroit has to throw at Karl Anthony Towns. It's guys like Jalen Duren. It's guys like Isaiah Stewart. You have those two bigs in the Pistons lineup, and I just don't think that's enough to throw at Karl Anthony Towns. Now I know people love Jalen Duren, but Jalen Duren, we got to remind ourselves, very young player. I mean, Detroit, they had 14 wins last season, but last season Detroit tried to replicate the we have a young core, we have young guys on our roster. Now we want to bring some veteran talent in and kind of surround them. Last year's veteran talent didn't do anything. They hardly played. They weren't impactful. Nothing. This year's veteran talent, however, you have Tobias Harris in the lineup. Malik Beasley, who's going to probably be second and sixth man of the year behind Pritchard. You have Tim Hardaway Jr. also. So Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley, and halfway through the season they added Dennis Schroeder as well. Great additions to this young core the Pistons added on to, and it took them to the sixth seed this year. And they all have chips on their shoulders from where they've been to the point where they've meshed well with this Pistons team, and they've come in and actually embraced that Detroit basketball culture. But I'll say this, all these guys, they're kind of everybody else's scraps in which the Pistons picked up off the street. It's like, oh, Tim Hardaway Jr. The Mavs didn't want Tim Hardaway Jr. Yeah, we'll take Tim Hardaway Jr. It's like, oh, Dennis Schroeder, the Heat didn't want him, the Warriors didn't want him, the Nets didn't want him. Okay, cool, for all different circumstances. Cool, we'll take Dennis Schroeder. We'll take him off your hands. Oh, Tobias Harris, the Sixers don't want him. Okay, yeah, we'll take him off your hands. Malik Beasley, the Bucks, they don't want you. Okay, we'll take you off your hands. And the Pistons have built their team through everybody else's we don't want Tim Hardaway. We don't want Tobias Harris. And that's where I look at this matchup and go, well, the Knicks, they're specifically built for this time of year. I mean, if you look at their starting lineup, you have Brunson and Towns, your two primary offensive creators, but in the middle, Hart, Anunoby, Bridges, those three guys in there, they're going to defend their asses off. They're going to be complete hound dogs on the floor. And we know that's kind of the weird dynamic with the Knicks. You have your two offensive creators who are probably your two biggest defensive liabilities on the floor. But then your stalwarts defensively, they're probably more of your in terms of offense, they're not creating as much as those two other guys. I would like to see New York use Bridges a little bit more within creating offense, letting him create his own offense. I could see a Middleton role with the Knicks for Mikal Bridges if Tom Thibodeau were to be a little bit more innovative in that way. However, we don't really see that with the Knicks, but that's kind of a conversation for another time, another series, maybe later on down the line. But in this series between the Knicks and Pistons, I think the Knicks are going to have enough defensively to throw at the Pistons to really stymie them. I think the experience matters here. You see, they're just more veteran. The Knicks are a more veteran-led squad than the Pistons, and the Pistons. Let's just say this as well. The Pistons, everybody loves them because they went 10-1 between basically a month stretch in March. They went 10-1, and in those 10 games, there was an 8-game winning streak. Now it included the Clippers and the Celtics. We'll say that. So two good teams in there. But I believe it also included two play-in teams or no, I guess the Clippers at the time, I was counting them as a playoff team. So you had two playoff teams, two play-in teams, and basically four lottery teams. Like the Pistons beat the Sixers, the Nets, the Hornets, Chicago twice. It was a run in which you looked at and went, this is just mostly tanking teams. This is mostly garbage teams at the bottom of the league. And the Pistons, they feasted off of all these squads, the veteran talent, which they had the developing young players. And they went 10-1 in March and had that 8-game winning streak. And everybody freaked out on the Pistons because of that moment. But ever since then, the Pistons have been a 500 ball club. And if you look at some of their numbers within some of their league rankings, whether it's rebounding, 3-point shooting, whatever you want to look at, they're middle of the pack in a lot of categories. And I lean more towards the fact this Pistons team is closer to a 500 ball club than an actual contending squad. And on the other side, the Knicks, I don't think they're going to contend with, say, the Celtics next round if the Celtics and Knicks face each other. But I do see the Knicks as closer to a contender than the Pistons at this point in time, who are just that new shiny thing out east that everybody wants to look at and think, oh, well, is this the next thing? Is this the next thing? I think the Pistons, they've obviously from last season, tremendous job in the regular season to get them to the 6th seed, get them out of the lottery, get them out of the losing funk. But it only goes so far in the NBA when you have real teams who are put together in off seasons of the past. The Knicks, I mean, it's taken multiple off seasons to get to this point for the New York Knicks, and I think they've built their squad in preparing for this moment in the playoffs. Whereas the Pistons, it's more of a this worked out. It's like we threw all this together and it worked out throughout the season. And I think in the playoffs that kind of stuff in the playoffs when it comes to how teams were put together, that always comes out come playoff time because when you're playing game after game after game, the team who's put together better than their opponent, I mean, they're always going to win out in those scenarios because they're always going to find the little holes. They're going to find where their advantages are on both ends of the floor. And I think this is going to be a series where we just see the Knicks methodically as the series go on. I think they're actually going to get better and they're eventually going to overcome the Pistons. I would say I'm leaning more Knicks in 6 here. I'll say Knicks in. I've been thinking about Knicks in 5, but I'm leaning towards Knicks in 6. A lot of people love the Pistons. So they'll just come out and say, I have the Pistons in the series, blah, blah, blah. But I don't, I'm not a huge Pistons believer. I hate to say, sorry, Justin Lowe. Sorry, Justin out there. Sorry, I'm not a huge Pistons believer. But in this series, I wouldn't be surprised if they do grab 2 games against the New York Knicks.
It's tough. It's tough. I'm all over the Knicks. You guys nailed it. First, what the most important factor of this series is Detroit being in the playoffs after what they did last year. Like that alone is a successful year. JB Bickerstaff, Cade Cunningham, the two of them, they brought a winning culture back to Detroit. So no matter the outcome, Detroit's season was miles of success. I mean, huge shout out to what Detroit did this year. However, you guys alluded to it. I mean, New York is built for the playoffs. They are against Boston and Cleveland and OKC. Sure, they struggled. Yeah. But I mean, we're talking, I mean, again, I would be shocked if New York loses this series or even has this thing go past 6. I'm all over Knicks in 5. I agree. Cade, if you say he's the best player in the series, up for debate. I mean, Will, you said the next 5 or 6 guys are all in the Knicks.
Right.
There's like 4 of those guys on the Knicks where any given night they could be the best player in the series on any, like for a 1 period game stretch. Bridges, Anunoby, Cat, Brunson. That's a hefty top 4. Detroit, if they're gonna do it, they're gonna have to muck up this series. I mean, they're gonna have to make it a dogfight, which they could do. You got Stu and you got Ron Holland and Cade's a dog. I mean, and Durant. I mean, you got some dogs on this on that team. But I don't know if they're ready to step into Madison Square Garden quite yet. It's a different beast. It's tough. It's the playoffs. So I'm with you. I'm gonna go Knicks in 5, but I also could see Detroit somehow like mucking up 1 extra game on some controversial ending, and you never know in the playoffs. So I could see 6. I don't see a world of 7. I don't see a sweep. I'm gonna say 5 or 6 is the sweet spot.